Elara was 10 years old when they cast her out of the town of Meridian. She stood before the town council, a slip of a girl in a threadbare dress, clutching a leather-bound journal. Her father's journal. It was all she had left of him. Mayor Theron looked down from his high-backed chair. His face was a mask of strained patience. "Child," he said, his voice echoing in the timber frame hall, "we have indulged these fantasies long enough." "It is not a fantasy," she whispered, her voice tight. "My father wrote it down. He saw the cycles, the 100-year resin, the drought that will parch the valley, the wind that will come from the west." A low chuckle moved through the assembled men. Jedediah Vance, the timber baron whose sawmills fed the town's prosperity, leaned forward. "Your father was a good man, Elara, a fine woodsman, but he spent too much time alone. It addled his mind." "He was not addled," she insisted, her knuckles white on the journal's cover. "He was observant. He said the great pines would become torches. He said the town, nestled in its cradle of wood, was a funeral pyre waiting for a spark." This time, the laughter was louder. Mr. Alastair Finch, the town surveyor, adjusted his spectacles. He unrolled a crisp new map of the county. "My dear girl," Finch said, his tone dripping with condescension. "We have modern fire breaks. We have steam-powered pumps and a reservoir. Our forestry practices are the most advanced in the territory. The notion of a firestorm, a blaze that could leap the Azure River, is unscientific." "The river will boil," Elara said, the words coming directly from a page she had memorized. "The fire will not be stopped by water. It will be carried on the air. It will create its own weather." Mayor Theron slammed his gavel. The sound cracked through the hall. "Enough! This is morbid talk. It frightens the children. It disrupts commerce. You are an orphan, Elara. The town has been charitable, but we will not tolerate this tale-telling." He pronounced the final words as if they were a disease. "You will take your father's mad scribbles," the mayor decreed. "You will go to the old quarryman's hut by the Granite Tor. You will not return to Meridian. You will not spread these poisonous stories. A cart will bring you provisions once a season. That is the extent of our charity." She did not cry. She simply nodded, her small face set like stone. She had expected this. Her father had written that they would not listen. "Men who profit from the forest," he had penned, "cannot see the flame for the trees." So she left, a 10-year-old girl, with a single journal and a mule laden with a few meager supplies, walking the dusty road out of town. The laughter of the townspeople followed her like a cruel wind. They were free of the bad seed. They were safe in their progressive, prosperous town. 18 years passed. The girl became a woman. The quarryman's hut rotted away. But Elara did not. She had moved into the rock itself. For 18 years she had worked. Her companion was a sturdy packhorse she named Mika, bought with the last of her father's coins. Her guide was the journal. Her tool was time. Her project was a sanctuary, a bunker, carved and blasted and levered out of the north face of the Granite Tor. She called it the Hearthstone. It was a dwelling born of prophecy and sweat. The entrance was a narrow passage, concealed by a thicket of hardy scrub brush. The door was a masterpiece of leverage and patience, a 4-ton slab of granite, perfectly balanced on a hidden iron pivot, movable by a single person with a long lever. Inside, a series of chambers descended into the cool, silent heart of the mountain. The main living space was circular, with a smooth, domed ceiling.
A central flue, ingeniously designed with a series of baffles, drew smoke from a small, efficient fire pit and vented it through a fissure 100 feet up the Tor's face, invisible from the valley below. Her father's journals had been explicit. He had drawn schematics. He had calculated tonnage and airflow. He was not just a woodsman. He was a self-taught engineer of survival. "The fire will consume the air," he had written. "Your enemy will be the smoke, then the heat, then the nothingness that follows." So she had designed the ventilation. 2 deep shafts, one for intake, one for exhaust, reached the surface on opposite sides of the Tor. The intake shaft was a complex filter, layers of river gravel, sand, and fine charcoal packed between screens of woven wire. It would scrub the air of ash and smoke, drawing clean, cool oxygen from the rock itself. She had dug a well, not a shallow thing, but a true shaft, driven 30 feet down through solid granite with star drills and hammers until she hit a deep, cold aquifer. The water was pure and endless. Her larder was the testament to her foresight. Shelves carved from the living rock held thousands of glass jars. Dried fruits, salted meats, pickled vegetables, rendered fats, smoked fish, and vast stores of grain and beans in sealed clay crocks. She had spent every summer and autumn for nearly 2 decades gathering, hunting, and preserving. A fortress of calories. Over the years, the town of Meridian had not forgotten her. She had become a local legend, a cautionary tale. Elara's Folly, they called her dwelling, after a hunter stumbled upon her worksite one season. Jedediah Vance, now richer than ever, had built a magnificent lodge on the highest ridge overlooking the town. He called it the Pinnacle. It was a sprawling monument of polished pine and glass, a testament to his dominion over the forest that had made him wealthy. He would often point towards the Granite Tor from his veranda, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Out there," he would tell his guests, "lives a madwoman digging her own grave. A lesson in what happens when you turn your back on progress." The phrase, "digging an Elara," entered the local vernacular. It meant to engage in a futile, obsessive task. When a farmer spent weeks clearing a rocky field that would never yield a crop, his neighbours would shake their heads. "He's digging an Elara." Mr. Finch, the surveyor, had paid her one visit years ago. He came in his official capacity, claiming concern over her unregulated construction. He walked through the half-finished chambers, tapping the walls with his hammer, making notes in a ledger. "Structurally unsound," he declared, his voice echoing with false authority. "This ventilation system defies all principles of modern engineering. You'll suffocate in here. The rock will sweat. Mold will grow. It is a death trap, madam. A tomb." He did not understand the natural convection. He did not understand the mountain's thermal mass. He saw only primitive methods, not the deep, practical wisdom that guided her hands. Elara had simply looked at him, her gaze as steady and unyielding as the granite around them. She did not argue. She did not defend her work. She let his ignorance fill the space between them, and then she showed him the door. Her labour was a silent rebuke to their mockery. It was a rhythm of existence. In the spring, she gathered tender shoots and fished the teeming streams. In the summer, she harvested berries and tended her small, hidden garden of hardy vegetables. In the autumn, she hunted deer and smoked the meat, turning the forest's bounty into future security. But the winters were for the rock. Day after day, the silence of the mountains was broken by the sharp ring of her hammer on a steel drill. Chip by chip, inch by inch, she moved tons of stone with nothing but leverage, rollers, and the patient strength of Micah. The horse was more than a beast of burden. He was her confidant, her silent companion. She spoke to him as she worked, her voice low and steady. She told him of her father's words, of the coming fire, of the world she was building to survive it. Micah would watch her, his large, dark eyes seeming to understand. She smoothed the walls of her chambers with chisels and water until they felt like worn river stones. She built furniture from scavenged timber, simple and strong. A bed, a table, 2 chairs, one for her, one for the ghost of her father. She knew the technical details by heart. The precise angle of the flue to maximize draw. The specific ratio of sand to charcoal in the filters. The number of jars she would need to survive for 2 years without setting a foot outside. Her father's journal was not a book of prophecy. It was a manual of engineering. While Meridian built with pine and pride, Elara built with granite and foresight. While they celebrated their expansion, she planned for contraction. While they looked to the sky for rain, she looked to the forest floor for signs. And then, in the 18th year of her exile, the signs began. It started with the drought. The spring rains were sparse. The summer came early, a hot, dry breath that baked the valley. The Azure River, normally a torrent, slowed to a murky crawl. The town's reservoir, the one Mr. Finch had been so proud of, dropped daily, exposing a muddy, cracked shoreline. Elara saw the pines. They began to weep resin, long, amber tears that coated their bark. Her father had called it the kindling sweat. The forest was turning itself into fuel. The animals knew. The squirrels, usually a chattering nuisance in the town, were gone. Elara watched them from her perch on the Tor, a frantic, months-long exodus. They were burying their winter stores, not in the forest, but far out in the barren scrublands to the east. The deer herds, which normally summered in the high meadows, bypassed the valley entirely. She saw them moving in long, disciplined lines along the eastern ridges, their heads low, a silent retreat from a danger they could smell on the wind. A strange silence fell over the forest. The birdsong dwindled. The air grew still and heavy, carrying a faint, metallic scent. It was the smell of a world holding its breath. Elara walked the perimeter of her home, checking every seal, every mechanism. She ran a hand over the cool, massive stone of her door. 18 years of her life. 18 years of their scorn. It had all led to this. For a fleeting moment, she considered warning them. She could walk back into Meridian, stand before the council, and tell them the signs were here. The memory of their faces stopped her. The smug certainty of Mayor Theron, the derisive laugh of Jedediah Vance, the condescending pity of Mr. Finch. They had not listened to the child. They would not listen to the mad woman from the Tor. Her father's words came back to her from the final page of his journal. Do not waste your breath on the death. Your duty is not to save them from their pride. Your duty is to the truth. Your duty is to endure. Her choice was made. Her duty was here. She did her final work with a calm, methodical grace. She brought the last of the harvested vegetables inside. She topped off the water cisterns from the well. She laid in a store of firewood near the fire pit, just enough for 2 years of careful cooking. Then she called to Micah. The horse came willingly, his hooves sure on the stone ramp that led down into the bunker. He entered a spacious, ventilated stall she had carved for him next to the main larder, complete with a deep trough and a 2-year supply of compressed hay and oats. He was safe. On the 19th of August, with the sun hanging in a hazy, brass-coloured sky, Elara stood at the entrance to the Hearthstone. She took one last look at the valley. At the town of Meridian, shimmering in the heat, a perfect model of prosperity. At the grand, foolish lodge of Jedediah Vance on its high ridge. She felt no anger, no triumph, only a profound and weary sadness. She took hold of the long iron lever. With a deep groan of stone on stone, the 4-ton granite door began to swing shut. It sealed with a soft, final thud, plunging her world into the cool, quiet dark of the mountain. Outside, the world waited for the spark. It came 2 days later. The catastrophe did not arrive with a whisper. It came as a physical blow. A dry lightning storm rolled in from the west, its thunder muffled by the oppressive, thick air. A single bolt, white-hot and jagged, struck the highest ridge. It struck the ancient, resin-weeping pine that stood like a sentinel beside Jedediah Vance's lodge, the pinnacle. The tree did not catch fire. It exploded. A plume of incandescent gas shot 200 feet into the air. Before the sound of the blast reached the valley, the wind hit. The wind her father had predicted. A hot, dry gale that had been gathering strength over the plains for a week. It was a thing of mythic violence. The fire did not spread. It detonated. It leaped from treetop to treetop, a crown fire of unimaginable speed and intensity. The pinnacle, Vance's monument to wood and wealth, vanished in less than a minute. It did not burn. It was vaporized, its glass windows melting into rivers of fire before the walls collapsed. In Meridian, they barely had time to react. The fire alarm began to peal, its frantic clangor almost immediately swallowed by a deeper sound. The roar. A sound like 1,000 freight trains, a sound that vibrated in the bones, a sound of the world being torn apart. Mayor Theron directed the volunteer fire brigade. They connected their prized steam pump to the reservoir, a pathetic stream of water sprayed towards the inferno. The heat was so intense that the water turned to steam before it travelled 30 feet. The reservoir itself, already low, began to boil at its edges. The sky turned from hazy yellow to a terrifying, pulsing orange. Then, as the smoke plume blotted out the sun, it went to a thick, suffocating blackness. Flaming brands, the size of fence posts, began to rain down on the town, carried for miles on the superheated wind. The town's proud, conventional structures failed. The shingled roofs, baked dry by the drought, ignited instantly. The pine frame houses, the very symbol of Meridian's prosperity, became ovens. The fire breaks Mr. Finch had so carefully surveyed were leaped in an instant. The fire did not care about his maps. Panic replaced order. The town's social structure dissolved into a primal scramble for survival. Families were separated in the smoke and chaos. The Azure River, their supposed final defense, was choked with ash and burning debris. The water was too hot to enter. Inside the Hearthstone, Elara felt the mountain tremble. A low, continuous vibration hummed through the rock. The air in her chamber remained cool and still. The only sound was the soft crackle of her small fire and the gentle munching of Micah in his stall. She sat at her simple table, her father's journal open before her. She lit a single tallow lamp. Its light cast a warm, steady glow on the smooth stone walls. Through the deep stone, the roar of the firestorm was a distant, muffled hum, like a seashell held to the ear. The air drawn down through the intake shaft was clean and sweet, smelling only of damp earth and charcoal. She had used a handful of logs. The mountain's geothermal mass kept the temperature inside at a constant, comfortable 55 degrees. Life continued in serene, insulated comfort. She ate a simple meal of dried beef and pickled beans. She drew a cool, clear bucket of water from her well. She was safe. She was prepared. She was alone. The firestorm raged for a full day and night. On the second day, the roaring subsided, replaced by an eerie, hissing silence. Outside, the world was a monochrome nightmare. Nothing remained of Meridian but charred foundations and twisted metal. The forest was gone, replaced by a forest of blackened, skeletal trunks standing in a sea of grey ash. The sky was a uniform, oppressive slate colour, and a fine, choking ash fell like a toxic snow, blanketing everything in a layer of soft, sterile dust. For 3 days, Elara waited. She listened. She tended to Mika. She read. On the 4th day, she heard a sound. A desperate, weak scratching at the outer entrance. A voice, hoarse and broken, calling her name. Elara, please. She took up the lever and opened the great stone door a crack. The grey light and the smell of ash filled the passage. A figure stumbled in and collapsed onto the stone floor. He was unrecognizable at first. His clothes were burned rags. His face and hands were blackened with soot and blistered from the heat. His hair was singed away. But she knew the spectacles, hanging precariously from one ear. It was Mr. Alistair Finch, the surveyor, the engineer who had called her home a death trap. He looked up at her, his eyes streaming with tears of pain and shame. It was just as you said, he rasped. It created its own weather. We didn't stand a chance. Elara looked down at the humbled man. She felt no satisfaction. No, I told you so. She saw only a suffering human being. Without a word, she helped him to his feet. She led him into the main chamber, sat him down on one of her 2 chairs, and gave him a ladle of clean water. He drank like a man dying of thirst, which he was. Then she tended to his burns with cool cloths and a salve her father's journal had taught her to make from comfrey root and rendered tallow. He was the first. He was not the last. Word must have spread among the dazed survivors huddled in the scorched riverbed. Mr. Finch had found shelter. He had found the madwoman. He had found salvation in Elara's folly. They came in a slow, ghost-like procession. A steady stream of families, their faces blank with shock, their bodies covered in ash. They were the very people who had laughed at her, who had scorned her. Now they looked upon her home with a desperate, holy reverence. Elara took them all in. The main chamber became a makeshift infirmary, a dormitory, a sanctuary. She did not speak of the past. She did not demand apologies. Of mockery was now a miracle. Her deep of mockery was now a miracle. Her deep well, a source of life. Her knowledge, their only hope. The outcast child became their silent, capable leader. Her calm efficiency was a balm to their shattered nerves. She moved among them, a quiet figure of authority, her face betraying no emotion but a deep, focused competence. The last to arrive were the most broken. Mayor Theron and Jedediah Vance. They stumbled to her door together, supporting one another. Vance, the timber baron, had lost everything. His mills, his lodge, his fortune, all were ash. Theron, the mayor, presided over a town that no longer existed. His authority was a ghost. They stood before her, 2 old men stripped of their pride. They could not meet her eyes.
Elara, the mayor began, his voice cracking. He could not finish.
The weight of his foolishness, the scale of the tragedy he had so arrogantly dismissed, was too much. She simply nodded and stood aside, letting them enter the warm, safe light of her home. The circle was complete. The mockers were all gathered, huddled in the refuge they had named a folly. Weeks passed. The ash stopped falling. The sky slowly cleared to a pale, wounded blue. Under Elara's guidance, a routine was established within the Hearthstone. The survivors were healing. The future, once an assumption, was now a question that needed to be answered. One evening, Mayor Theron stood before the assembled survivors in the main chamber. The soft light of a few lamps illuminated their weary faces. Elara stood at the back, near the entrance to the larder, watching. "We need to have a reckoning," Theron said, his voice quiet but clear. He looked at Jedediah Vance and Alastair Finch, who stood beside him. They both nodded. Theron turned his gaze directly to Elara.
For 18 years,
He began, his voice thick with emotion. We called this woman a fool. We cast her out for speaking a truth we were too proud and too comfortable to hear. We called her home Elara's folly. We invented a phrase, digging an Elara, to mock her foresight as useless obsession. He paused, taking a ragged breath. We were the fools. Our progress was a house of sticks. Our wisdom was ash on the wind. This folly, this home, is the only reason any of us are alive today. He took a step forward, his eyes pleading for an absolution she was not required to give. Elara, you were right, and we were wrong. We are so profoundly, devastatingly sorry. Jedediah Vance stepped forward next. The arrogant timber baron was gone, replaced by a humbled, grieving man. My pride, he said, his voice hoarse, built a torch on a hill, and I called it a monument. Your wisdom built a sanctuary in the rock. I am sorry for my laughter.
it was the braying of an idiot.
Then came Mr. Finch. My science was a book of rules with no understanding. I called this place a death trap. I was wrong. It is the cradle of our new world. I am sorry for my arrogance. A silence fell over the chamber. All eyes were on Elara. They waited for her judgment, her anger, her absolution. She stepped forward into the lamplight. Her face was calm, her expression unreadable. Your apologies are heard, she said, her voice even and steady. It was not the voice of a victim, but of a teacher. But sorrow does not rebuild a world. Pride burns. Preparation endures. That is the only lesson. She looked around at the faces staring back at her. I will not offer you forgiveness. That is for you to find for yourselves. I will offer you instruction. I will teach you what my father taught me. How to listen to the land. How to build with respect for its power. How to survive. Her words were not a comfort. They were a challenge.
It was the beginning of their education. They did not rebuild Meridian in the valley. The place was a grave, haunted by the ghosts of their pride. Instead, they built a new town near the Granite Tor. They built it using Elara's principles. Houses were dug into the hillsides, sheltered by earth, with stone facades and sod roofs. They were fireproof, cool in the summer and warm in the winter. They learned to build not against nature, but with it. The phrase, digging an Elara, was reborn. It came to mean acting with uncommon foresight.
To plant a grove of fire-resistant hardwoods as a future shield for the town was digging an Elara. To build a deeper well than was currently needed was digging an Elara. The name of the outcast became the name of their highest virtue, wisdom. Elara never fully rejoined their community. She lived out her days in the Hearthstone, her solitude now a mark of honor, not exile. She became their teacher, their sage. The children of the new town, which they simply called Hearth, would come to her door to learn. She taught them how to read the signs in the forest. She taught them which plants healed and which nourished. She taught them how to build, how to preserve, how to endure. She gave them the knowledge from her father's journal, ensuring his legacy would be their survival. She lived for another 50 years, a solitary, revered figure. She never married. She never had children of her own, though, in a way, all the children of Hearth were hers. She died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, in the stone bed she had carved for herself so long ago. The people of Hearth buried her not in the ground, but in a new chamber they carved deep within the Hearthstone, sealing it with a single, perfectly cut slab of granite. Over the main entrance, the door that had saved them all, they placed a simple bronze plaque. It did not list her date of birth or death.
It bore a single sentence, the founding principle of their entire civilization. She saw the truth in the earth, while we saw only folly in the sky.